Hello, Danielle. I see.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I see Naisha as well.
Yes, I'm on. I'm headed home. We had tricky transition for Title 1 where sixth grade counselor come and talk to our fifth grade parents about transitioning to middle school.
Oh, well,
So yeah,
good.
we started this about 2 years ago.
Now, now, if you could just
And
get
we
it at the beginning of the year where you would hope that it would modify their behavior during the year. The horse is kind of out of the barn by this time of year, but I get it.
yeah. So that no, they really talked to the parents about what to expect going into middle school.
Yeah. Well, that won't make any difference. They'll still be whiny and complaining just like their kids are.
And
Of
that's what one parent was doing the whole time, getting
course,
on my
they're
nerves.
middle school
Getting on my
parents.
nerves.
Yeah.
I
Get on
said,
your
Lord,
life's
have
nerve.
mercy.
Oh my God. Middle school parents
Just
are the
listen,
worst.
just listen to the lady and be like, okay, bye, let's go. I'm ready to get out of here.
Oh God. No, no, that's what we talked about earlier. One of my rants earlier this semester is about these articulation meetings from grade level to
Hmm.
grade level. We don't have time to do them anymore correctly. We got people at night trying to do stuff like this. This is not the
Hmm.
way. If it's important, we would make time to do it for real, and
Right.
it is very important.
It is. Because their parents really enjoyed it. Some of them, this is their first child going to middle school. So the things that they were talking
Yeah,
about and breaking it down, they was like, thank y'all for doing this. Like we had a
yeah,
couple first parents, this their first child going to middle school.
yeah,
So they was
and that's
really appreciative of it.
and they should be, and it's going to be a big change.
Yeah.
One thing that who was it was talking last weekend in my 738 group that hey Regina they were moving the fifth graders around and doing a little block with them to try to get them ready for middle school. I used to do that
Hmm.
when I was an elementary principal when I first started out. We were K6. And our sixth
Mm.
graders, we had them up in a building where we could change classes. So we got them used to that. And then
Okay,
we went to a
good.
K5. I did little blocks where I got them ready to transition to middle school. Uh,
Uh-huh.
now, you got to have upper elementary teachers that understand the bigger picture and not just making their day easier. Um, You would think
Yeah.
that would everybody would agree, but what a wonderful thing that is. Hello, Jerron. Um, but boy, I tell you what, some of them fifth grade teachers, um, they act like you made them ask them to give blood or a child to do something
Yeah.
like that, to
Yes,
block a
Lord.
little bit. Um,
Yeah.
and you try to convince them that it's the right thing for the kids. And you have to remind them on a regular basis and not in a threatening way but that we
Hmm.
have to run school for what's best for kids.
Right,
I'll
exactly.
facilitate you as much as I can. I'll support you. I'll do everything I can. But when it comes down to it, our job is to prepare these kids for the next level, always for the
Right.
next level.
Right. Exactly.
Um, I'm big on that. Uh, I think that's real important. Now, I know
Yes.
I'm old school, but I still think that we need to always have an urgency from doing what we're doing now, create that sense of urgency that there's always something bigger and more and better that we're
Yeah.
scaffolding these kids up.
Hmm.
Fifth grade is not the be all end all. It's to prepare us for sixth grade.
Exactly.
Um, but I see too many teachers who are only interested in what's best for them, um,
Yeah, that's
and
what it is.
making their day easier.
And I'm
And
so happy. Yep.
but our job as school administrators is to see that bigger picture and understand,
Hmm.
the greater good.
Right.
And so that's why I spent the time to bore y'all in class with. I'm a big believer in articulation. That What is it kids are going to need to know at the next level? What format, what structure? Let's do what we do, but let's prepare them for that as well. We're doing them a disservice if we don't. And teachers need to be the ones that collaborate. But again, you have to step outside of what's easiest and most comfortable for you to do that. Teachers don't like to do that much anymore. Um,
No, they don't.
they see it as something extra, just a burden. Um, and with a lot of them, the least they can do is the least they can do. That's what they want to do. Now, as we've talked, that's a generational thing.
Dame mangos.
That is a generational thing. Where I'm just going to put in my 8 hours a day and then I'm going to lay it down and I'm going to pick it back up the next day. I'm not going to think about it, be worried with it. I'm only going to do, I'm punching in, I'm punching out. That's about time. You'll never be successful as a school if your school just runs on the notion of time is what matters and not talent and not working with kids and doing the right things with them. Um, there is a greater good, and your teachers have to see that. They don't always, but that's your job is to get them to see the greater good. I'm gonna go ahead. It's about 7:05. All right. And so let me share my screen, and we'll try not to be here too late this evening. All right. So looking at our weekly schedule. We are at our last class meeting for the semester. We've done all of our residency. We're good to go. We have one last night tonight. Naisha has her presentation on the last three chapters of our book, 21, 22, and 23, the Glickman chapters. We'll have that this evening. Just as a reminder, let me go. Here is your summer schedule. You will be with Dr. Patterson for 7:40 rather than Dr. Fisher. The weekends are May 30, 31, June 13, 14, which is the dissertation conference, next steps. And then your last weekend will be July 18, 19. Again, Dr. Fisher has been replaced with Dr. Patterson for your group. No, wait a minute. This is 7:34. You will be with me this summer, unfortunately. Um, you will have to do a double with me. And so this is y'all right here. 7:34. These two have been collapsed together. And so we will meet on May 6 and 7, May 27 and 28, and July 18, 19. Those will be our three right here. Dr. Patterson's group has been collapsed into mine, and I meet on May 6, 7, June 27, 28, and July 18, 19. Those are the weekends that we meet. Now, you notice that you are not booked for the 13th or 14th, however, of June. I would encourage you, if you can, I would encourage you to come to Charlotte that weekend. That is the next dissertation conference. Now, you will get that when you're in 740, but it's not a bad idea to see some of that stuff now. Now, I know some of you it would mean having to travel, like coming for the weekend, spending the night, and doing all of that. But um, if you're available, that weekend would be well worth your time. I have a question from Danielle.
I know, thank you for the update, but I know when you showed us the first time, some of us had a different schedule where we were going to go to Miss Dr. Patterson, or if we couldn't make Dr. Patterson, we were going to come for one of your weeks. How do we make up a week that
All
we're not
right,
able to
so
come?
you can come any week now because I'll be there all 6 weeks. Any week you want to come.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so just for clarification, the classes are not combined. You're just teaching both of them.
There will be, you'll be in the same room with me.
Okay.
Got you. Because I
They're,
can't come
they're,
to
they're, they're
27.
collapsing what they call collapsing the class. These two right here, let me pull that back up again. These
Yeah.
two have been collapsed, Lamb and Patterson 734 into my schedule. So there'll be 16 people in the room. I'll have
Okay.
both classes at the same time. Now, as you can see, because I also have 740, any weekend you miss, you can just come to one of the others because I'll be there every week. How many is there? One, two, three, four, five. I'll be there all 6 weeks of summer.
Okay. So I can really keep my same schedule that the way I had it with her the first time
Yeah,
substituting.
yeah,
Okay. So the 30th and 31st, 6 and 7, and then
yep,
the 18th, 19th. Okay.
yep,
Sounds great.
yep.
And
Just
I know I had
remind me
sent
when
you all
you're
an
there.
email. Okay, I will. And then I
Just
had sent the
remind me when
email.
you're there. If I have anything for you to do, and if not, you can work on your dissertation until lunchtime. Then I won't come looking for you in the afternoon.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Uh,
I'm
that would be some, you could catch up on some different things. Or you could sit in and hear me rant and throw stuff. That's up to you. But yeah, I'm gonna have 734 and 740. Dr. Patterson is taking the other 740, but that's not y'all. You were going to have her, you will now have me because we're collapsing those together. I know that exceeds the limit, but they said nanny nanny boo boo. We don't have to. There was an email barrage going back and forth between the dean of the graduate school and the dean of the college of education, and she finally just pulled rank on him and said, "Because I said so," just like your mama. So I thought it was quite hilarious, um, and so because I knew where it was going to end. This happens to me regularly. Rarely do I have a semester that I don't teach a double class for the price of one. Rarely. Been that way forever. Um, and so, especially in the summer, they try to cut a salary. So there is no limit. One summer in the MSA program, I had 32 in one class. So I always get doubled up in the summer. It's becoming an expectation. What was different this year was they're making the EDCIs double up too. And boy, they're mattering a wet hen. They can't believe that she did that to them. And I was like, there you go. Um, because she's one of y'all thought y'all would get the pass. It did not happen. Um, and their feelings were hurt. Oh, they were just so hurt. You know, life's hard, and you die. Move on. You'll be okay. You can tell they've never been school administrators. You just load up and keep going. I mean, that's your option. But they just melted down. I thought it was quite hilarious. All right, so let's see what else I wanted to share with you tonight before we get started with Naisha's presentation. We talked about the summer. We've talked about the schedule. Let me look up here to make sure. Oh, I want to look at the grade book. Um, Focus. About everybody's submitted. Um, Focus, if you would, on getting your curriculum audit into TaskStream. I'll continue to grade, as I said, the remainder of the week. Don't tell anybody, but I've already turned final grades in. Everybody's good. But the main thing is make sure that you get that curriculum audit in there and don't get behind on that task stream portfolio. We have to submit that thing to DPI to get your license at the end of this thing. So don't get behind on your portfolio. All my stuff's not nearly as important as that curriculum audit and getting that one, getting it to task stream. Because that determines whether you get your license in the end, is whether you've done your portfolio. All the rest of this stuff is just busy work mostly. But get your CA done. Make sure you get it. You don't want to be behind. All right. Okay. Anybody else have anything for the good of the group tonight that I have missed? We know our summer schedule. Y'all be back with me. the other class will join us the first weekend. Let's look at that again. Let me share my screen and look at that first weekend again. All right, so the first weekend for y'all will be June 6 and 7. So that means y'all get an extra week before we start. So my 734 class that y'all will now be with me is June 6 and 7 right here. Let me make that bigger. No, I didn't make it any bigger. And then June 27, 28, 3 weeks later. And then 3 weeks later, July 18, 19. I'll bring biscuits. I'll put out an email. We'll get biscuits the first time, unless y'all want something else in the summer. Anybody have any other suggestions other than biscuits on the first weekend? Yeah, we'll have something for breakfast. I'll put out an email for the link to order you biscuit. We'll do biscuits. That's probably good. All right, let me stop my share. Anybody have anything before we go to Naisha? All right, I'm gonna stop my share and turn my screen off. Naisha, you ready with our last presentation of the semester?
Yes, sir, I am. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Outstanding. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. All right. Can you see my screen?
I'm going to say buenas tardes because it's Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah, it is.
Cinco de
Cinco de
Mayo.
Mayo.
Happy Cinco de Mayo.
I
Yes.
made a burrito for dinner.
Outstanding. Okay, can
Green
everyone see?
chilies. We
I
can
can't
see
see
it.
you all. Okay, perfect. I can't see you all, but I will try to read the room as best I can. So I have the pleasure of ending with chapters 21 through 23, facilitating change, addressing diversity, and building community. And Dr. Lamb, you sort of led into my presentation as you were speaking earlier when Danielle was on. We as change agents, as instructional leaders, we have to see the bigger picture, right? And so as change agents, we have to make sure we are facilitating the change, addressing the change, and building community. So let's hop right on in. 3 chapters here that we're going to focus on for facilitating change. Why do change efforts fail? We'll address that. We'll also look at addressing diversity within our schools, within our school systems, understanding cultural differences, and then most importantly, building communities. What does that look like when we have teachers collaborate, when teachers work together? Dr. Lamb also mentioned earlier that we are in a different generation. This generation is different, right? They don't hold the course and they like to work in silos or on an island by themselves, but you get the biggest bang for your buck when teachers are collaborating. So we'll talk about that as well. These chapters were very rich in depth of knowledge, but I'm going to only highlight the most important things that I think will help us as instructional leaders. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is why do change efforts fail? What does that look like? Why are schools failing? And so the author talked about schools approaching change like building a house, looking at a blueprint. But schools are not machines. Every school is different. School is a living, breathing, unpredictable community. So we have to make sure we are putting measures in place to ensure change happens effectively and that change doesn't fail. So there are 4 areas here that the author looks at in terms of the tools that are wrong for change. And those tools are first, assuming stability. So we have to treat the school and its environment as a stable and predictable entity. So we have to make sure that we are looking at, why staff leave, looking at budgets, looking at why change happens, and then looking at how politics plays a role in that. Then the top-down pressure. We want to, sometimes as educators, as leaders, we want people to go along with us just because. We try to persuade them to go to trainings. We mandate changes rather than promoting the ownership and the genuine feel of a school that affords staff members to stay and to be a part of a school. Then as leaders, sometimes we blame teachers. When things fail, we blame the teachers, but in reality, it's not the teachers, it's the model itself. It's how we design, is what we design and how we implement it that causes the failure. And then we also scar teachers. We create scar tissues with teachers because they get tired of, and I can also speak for that, as even as an administrator, we get tired of seeing the same initiative, or even not sticking with an initiative and jumping into something else. And then when an initiative really comes along, that's great, we ignore it or we're not interested because of what we've experienced in the past. Then there's what the author calls the chaos theory, where schools are not linear systems. Okay, so with this, it's the chaos theory. The complex systems behave in ways that cannot be predicted or controlled. And so, for instance, we cannot have systems where we are controlling from the top down. The control must be a control where everyone has a part in it and it's nurtured and organic. Number two, complexity. So a school can't be measured by a single test, a single EOC, a single EOG, although that's the era age in which we're living now. But we must ask ourselves, what needs to change? What is the change? What needs to change? What do we want to do in order to impart that change? And how do we measure success? What does that look like? And what I like about Portrait of a Graduate, and with those elements, we can see and help students understand the elements of Portrait of a Graduate, and we are not focused on how they performed on a test. Then there's the butterfly effect, and then that's the small event or one part that can happen in a school that can have an enormous or profound impact on another part of a school. And that's sometimes impossible to predict. It's impossible to predict the long-term effects. So for instance, I'll give an example. With the butterfly effect, you may have a negative press or a negative, something that hits the news, and it's hard to get rid of that, and it has a long-term effect on your school. Your school can be looked at as, not the best school, or and vice versa. Then there's fractals. It's that cultural pattern that appears in everything you do in the school, in your staff meetings, department meetings, even within the classrooms, and even in hallway conversations. It's that system you have in place, or that culture of things that continues to happen in your school. Then we have the feedback mechanisms. How are we providing feedback to our teachers? How are we creating a system? What systems do we have in place to feed or give data to teachers? So another example for us, I make sure in every school improvement team meeting, I am presenting data that we've looked at over the last month since the previous meeting. And I'm giving real-time information on the data, not just to our EOC teachers, but every member of our school improvement team, so they are made aware of what's going on within the school. And then number 6, turbulence. So I like what the author says here. Sometimes turbulence is necessary for growth. And without disruptions, without that turbulence, sometimes you're stagnant. Things don't change. But also, on the contrary, too much turbulence can also destroy a change agent or change efforts. And then strange attractors. So you must have student-centered learning. It's embedded everywhere in everything you do, in your clubs, activities, and it creates lasting improvement. Next, we have the postmodern theory, and that says there's no one-size-fits-all answers. Every school is different. Every district is different. And then there are 6 components on the postmodern theory. The first is reject the meta-narrative. In other words, the big top-down reform programs, they don't necessarily work because of the local context. You have to look at the picture and whether it fits into your story as a school or a community or a culture. You have to make sure that whatever program you put in place, it may not work for the next school. I know our former superintendent used to say we are a school system and not a system of schools, but we have to also remember what may happen in my school may not work for another school. Then you have knowledge is local. So you want to make sure that you are using your staff and faculty, those who are closest to the problems in your school. They are the real experts. And once again, what happens in one school may not necessarily work in another. Then you have the multiple truths exist. And that's different groups in the same school with different experiences interpreting change differently. Okay, so that can be a good thing as well. And it's not a problem to solve, but it's just something for you to prepare for. But you also have to remember that conversations, dialogue, collaboration is essential to making sure everyone is on the same page. Then you have power matters. Those change efforts threaten existing power relationships. You may have a group or a clique in your school who may resist a change, and it may be small in number, but they're large in volume and might. So you want to make sure you're speaking with those individuals as well and hearing from them. Good change leaders, such as us, we study and acknowledge those who hold the power and see how we can bring them to the table. Then individual plus collective together. So neither solo work nor group work alone produces lasting change. So the author talks about the most effective approach to this is combining the innovation of teachers and working together collaboratively to make the collective change. It's almost like collective teacher efficacy. Your teachers agree that they together can move students within your building. And then finally, change is unpredictable. So progress will happen locally in ways you can't fully predict. So just like with any day, every day is unpredictable as educational leaders. We don't know what today holds, what tomorrow holds. It never looks the same. I mean, in any classroom across your building, but you must plan for a variety of the uniformity, plan for what may come, plan for the demanding or the demands of your building, and know how to bring those demands to the or collective voice and collective decision making. And then finally, here we have the educational change and the educational change theory. There are 8 concepts to this theory, and they all sort of speak for themselves, building capacity within the school, within teachers, allowing teachers to create collaborative networks, making sure you have a vision that comes before action. The vision comes after action, but not before. The commitment, you don't want to mandate change, but you want to build it. You want to make sure your teachers are connected to your innovation, connected, have a purpose. Dr. Lamb spoke on this earlier in our session that your morals and values will also dictate who you are and how you lead a school. So you want to make sure you are committed to the process and pulling your teachers along and making sure you're presenting moral values and purpose. And then leadership. You want to spread leadership everywhere. We want to, distribute great leadership. We want to make sure we're just creating teams within our building. We're giving them a voice. We're giving them a job in their role. We're making sure they can bring something to the table. They are coordinating events. We're building the leadership capacity of all of those in our building. And then evolutionary planning. So we want to make sure that change is a journey and not necessarily a blueprint like building a house, but we want to plan goals that are 1 to 2 years out, but make sure they're flexible and make sure we are implementing goals that adapt to what we want our students to be able to learn and know while in our building. And then problem solving. So problems are your friends. We face problems every day. So we have to figure out how we're going to handle the conflict, how we're going to collaborate on the conflict, have conversations, and then refrain from resisting the problem. We want to make sure that we are using those problems to help improve our school and our change efforts. And then support. So both external networks are essential. We're talking about your stakeholders. We're talking about those outside of your school. We want to make sure we're bringing support in to help our learners and to help change the shape and change the moral of our school. And then coherence. We want to avoid overload and fragmenting these ideas. So we want to embed them in innovations at every part of the school level. So we want fewer initiatives, fewer innovations, but we want to make sure we do them deeply and make sure we are doing them with purpose. And then norms of continuous improvement. What does it look like in your building when you have a sit meeting? What does it look like when you walk into a classroom? What does it look like when you're working on innovative projects? What are those norms that you will continue to use across your building through, and it shows through everything you do. Okay, that was chapter 21.
Can I get you to stop for a minute? I want to make a
Yes,
couple of
sir.
points.
Yes, sir.
I'll be brief. Starting with generational issues. Younger people have grown up on screens. They did not go out in the yard and free play and do things of that nature. Athletic teams are no longer really teams, they are collectives of individuals. It used to be that folks wanted to hire people who had been on athletic teams because they knew how to work together. That is no longer the case. Kids now are with NIL and college scholarships and travel ball, they're all about their own stats. They simply being on a team does not mean that they've learned teamwork or teammates. um, that's going to be an issue for you. You're going to have to teach people how to be a part of a team. I know that sounds dumb. I'm guilty, but I'm just telling you, you're not going to be able to assume that people know how to team anymore. You're going to have to go back to the very beginning, like you do with PLCs, and work on norms, values, how to be a teammate, roles, responsibilities. You're going to have to set that for teams now. You're not just going to say, all right, you four people are going to be a team, go. That's never going to happen again in our business. You have to understand that. They do not have, younger people do not have experience working as teams with individuals face to face. That's not a thing. So that's really going to be an issue. And so we go back to the four on how to set up PLCs with your small
Mhm.
teams. You're going to have to do that with everything that you do. Just understand that. The culture has to be the same. Again, we do things a certain way until it's the administration, and then we give ourselves a pass. We do time on task, protect instructional time until we don't, or until we're efficient in our meetings and the things we do until we aren't, and we have a 2 or 3 hour faculty meeting. It has to be consistent all the way through. Now, what that doesn't, it's not just speaking to the teachers. That's speaking to you as an administrator. You have to abide by those same rules as well. That's the one thing that leaders think that they get a pass on. You do not. Um, I think I've already told you the story of Harold, the principal that tried the Suspend Mama into School program, and it went completely wrong because it had been piloted in a private Catholic school where all the mothers were stay-at-home mothers. He was at a place where all the moms worked, and if they didn't eat that night. Again, it goes to amplify Naisha's point that all programs don't work in all populations or samples or all schools. When you're looking for something to implement a program, the most important thing is not the ins and outs of the particulars of the program, but where did it work? Did that school look like yours? That won't guarantee success, but if it didn't look like yours, it will guarantee failure. Let me say that again. Because the place where this program worked looked like yours won't guarantee its success. But if it doesn't look like yours, it will guarantee the failure. Understand that. So the setting, the population, the sample, the participants, they have to mirror what you have to give you a chance to be successful. Um, that's very important. Um, and the last thing that I wanted to make sure is teacher leadership. Todd Whitaker. Again, if you don't know Todd, you should all know Todd Whitaker. Understanding that developing teacher leaders is a process, and there's five steps according to Whitaker. You need to know those 5 steps, and you need to employ those 5 steps with your teachers. The first being teach other teachers. Then be involved with curriculum, be involved with the budget, be involved with school improvement plan, be involved with the school leadership team. And then the highest level is be involved in the hiring process for other teachers. There is a system to grow these people into teacher leaders. It won't happen eeny, meeny, miny, mo. It is a process. Whitaker has outlined that for you. You need to understand that you have to grow. If you don't have the ones you want or need, you have to grow them. And there are steps that you have to take. It's not random. Whitaker has laid out those steps for you. I think that may be more important now with residency teachers and lateral entries and all the people that we're getting now are young people who couldn't pass the test and all these issues that we're having now. More than ever, you're going to have to grow the people that you need because you won't get the ones that you want. All right, thank you for that, Aisha. Moving on.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So next we're going to talk about addressing diversity within our schools and our school systems. So I love this quote here. The achievement gap is not a student problem. It is a schooling problem. So let's jump right into what this looks like, cultural clashes and subtractive schooling. So most teachers, without knowing, most harm is done to students. It is sometimes unintentional. However, there are 6 of these cultural clashes or subtractive schooling, which means that when students' own cultures are absent from the curriculum or absent from, helping students build background knowledge, then students feel like the schooling is irrelevant for them. So let's take a look at stereotypes and low expectations. This is when teachers assume, minority or low income students are less motivated. They teach down instead of teaching up, instead of helping them rise to the standards. Then also misreading student behavior as students being either disrespectful or students just not caring about their schooling. They look at it as a cultural clash. And so teachers just interpret that as students not caring. Then there are communication styles. Teachers misread cultural preferences and translate it to unclear thinking. And I can give lots of stories about how I've seen this, how I've seen the stereotypes and the behaviors, misunderstanding the behaviors. But we have to be culturally responsive to teaching within our schools. And then we look at the misdiagnosis and tracking. So minority students are, referred more often than their counterparts. They are not referred to the gifted programs. And then that's often due to the cultural biases or just their, assessments or their lack of engagement within the classroom. And we talked about the subtractive schooling and the Eurocentric curriculum. When their own culture is not present, students are not interested. And then barriers to parent involvement. So I heard Danielle speaking earlier, and she and Dr. Lamb were talking about, having a transitional meeting for parents, and schools schedule these meetings when they're, at least the least time or the most inconvenient time for parents, because, quite frankly, parents have to work, right? And so they're not conducive to the times that parents can come in. I always tell my staff, let's not use, acronyms. Let's not use jargon. Let's make sure our parents understand specifically what we're saying so they know best how to help their child. So we want to make sure that we don't subtract schooling from culture, from the students' culture, but in other words, embed it within their learning and the curriculum. Then we have the culturally responsive teaching. What does that look like? So teaching is not a script, it's an art. Teachers have to make sure that they are viewing themselves as professionals and making decisions that are best for students, and not, using a script or a prescribed manual to teach students. They have to build genuine relationships. When students know you care, they're going to learn. They will do and move mountains for you. So they'll learn when they know you care. Make sure we're treating students as individuals. And that also goes for the adults, other adults in the building. That goes for our international teachers as well. We want to make sure we are creating a multicultural classroom environment for all of our students. Don't look at their language as a hindrance, but how do we incorporate their language into the content and the curriculum? Learning from students and their families. Students love to share their stories. So how do we listen intently and have an active role in hearing, or active listening ear in learning about students and their families and their culture? And then, so we want to make sure that as a culturally responsive teacher, we want to help students understand that they can't choose to fail. That's not an option, that we are here to help them. And then we want to make sure that we're helping to build them to their highest potential. And then the transformational teaching. Students are taught to critique the status quo. That means you're going to stand up for what you know is right. You're going to work for change. And in the end, you are going to be successful based on your transformational ideas and ideals. The 6 stages of intercultural sensitivity. So the author here says that teachers normally most teachers get stuck on number 3, stage 3, the minimization. So first there's the denial. They can't see the real difference, the cultural differences. They isolate themselves from the culture or the classroom, a student's culture, or they may sometimes stereotype or discriminate. Then there's the defense stage, where a teacher sees the difference but views them as negative. So it's a us against them mindset. And then there's the minimization. We're all basically the same. That's their thought process, and accepts the surface level differences, such as their style of music, the style of clothing, style of food, but believes in one universal human nature. Then to move past that, you have to accept students in their culture for who they are. You accept their different cultures. You have different values, or understand their values. Then you see them as alternatives, but still working towards a skill to build their skill. Then there's adaptation. This can shift the perspective to see through another culture's worldview. You want to change your thoughts on just your area, your culture, but to see a broader picture. Then you're able to modify teaching based on those differences. Then we have integration, and this has the internalized multiple cultural framework. So this means that students get to feel at home in different cultures. They can mediate between groups, teachers can, and help students see that there is a bigger picture than where they are currently or their culture. Okay, so that was chapter 2022, and that's the diversity piece. Now we're going to look at building community, and I'll pause right there, Dr. Lamb.
All right, I've got 2 things. I'll be quick.
Okay.
You hit on one thing that I really, really stress when I do interview training for prospective principals and assistant principals. There's always a round 2 interview where they bring in a group of people, including parents. And the one thing that we're looking for when hiring either assistant principals or principals, can you talk to parents without using acronyms and jargon? Can you communicate with them in a way that they understand if you can't do it at the interview stage, you won't do it when you get hired. And there'll be this disconnect between the school and the community. That's one of there is a whole round of interviews designed to see how well that you can do that as a potential school leader. I've got a PowerPoint. I work with that one real hard. That one's very, very important. If you want to, in fact, partner with your community, I think that's the most important one right there. And I'm glad that Aisha hit that one. The other is our definition of giftedness. We know that too many kids of color are identified for EC, but not for gifted. Kenny Jackson was my doctoral student in EDLS. He finished last year at this time. Or did he finish at Christmas? He finished at Christmas. We did one on gifted. Um, and the issue becomes our definition of gifted. And that's something that we should not be looking to. What Kenny's dissertation found is we shouldn't be looking to modify the existing structure. We need a different structure for identifying gifted students. We've talked about and tried to modify the existing one for the last 45 years. Well, soon be, I guess it's closer to 50 years now. When's 1974? Is that 50 years ago? I guess it was. 51 years, 52 years ago. I mean, we started gifted programs right after that, and we've basically had the same formula for the last 50 years, and we've tried to modify it. It's not going, modifying it will not work. Modifying it will not work. We're going to have a different type of system to identify gifted if we're serious about discrepancies among different categories, classes of kids. It's just that simple. A quick story. When I was high school principal in Charlotte, I had a long-term sub. He was an older gentleman. He had retired. He taught his entire career in California. Um, and This was at a time before, again, this was mid 90s. He had retired some years before. He was my long-term sub that came every day. His name was Roger Palmer. He said one of the smartest kids that he ever taught in school was not in the gifted program at Cal Poly in Long Beach. His name was Calvin Broadus. I don't know if y'all know who that is. That'd be Snoop Dogg. He taught Snoop and stayed in touch with him, and we did some things with him. But he stayed in touch with Mr. Palmer. But Mr. Palmer, that was the perfect example of he was one of the smartest kids in the building, but wasn't in the gifted program because he didn't fit the traditional path of gifted. But that's my gifted story. That's a perfect example of what we're talking about. We're going to have a different definition of giftedness if we're ever going to address this systemic inequity that's built into that part of it. And I think if we did that, it would help with the bottom end on identifying way too many at the other end as well. I think we're going to have to start with the gifted one first. I really do. I came to that conclusion a long time ago that we can't fix the bigger problem at the bottom until we fix the problem at the top. And the top is we're going to have a different definition of giftedness. Back to you, Naisha. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we're looking next at building community. This is bringing up the rear. So when we think about building community, we first start with the democratic community. So there are three powerful reasons to do that. It sustains democracy, schools work better, and students learn more. So with this democratic model here, we want to look at what the work that students are actively doing, what real problems are they bringing to the table and learning about. Are there escalating degrees of choice? Are students given the choice to learn, choices to, or options to choose from in their learning process? Is there a shared learning with their peers? Do they get to collaborate with peers? Do they get to collaborate with their community members, with stakeholders? And then do students take responsibility for their collective success? Are students working together and they are collectively successful? Are they responsible for their success? And then do they demonstrate knowledge in public settings? Their learning shouldn't just happen in school and stay within the school walls. What does that look like once they're outside of the school walls? So this democratic community shines light on these three elements or components to make sure students are learning successfully. And not only students, but when schools work together, they are building the capacity of teachers and teacher leaders and collaborating more, and students are gaining knowledge through this channel or this platform, if you will. Then we have The moral community. There are 9 principles of a good school. What does that look like in the moral community? The adults are caring about students. There's a wholeness. The whole child is looked at and not just grades. And this applies to teachers too. There's a nurturing feel in the building. There's a nurturing feel in the culture of the school. The connectedness. Are there any barriers? If there are barriers, those barriers are removed. There's a connection through learning. There's a connection through getting to know each other in the presence of their peers, as well as the teachers and staff. Inclusion. Is every student equal? Is every student involved in the school? What challenges exist, and how do those challenges, when those challenges exist, what members of the community or the stakeholders are helping to fix those challenges? Justice. Every person is treated fairly and consistently. That also goes into discipline. How do we handle discipline for multiple races within our building? Peace. Can students come to school and learn about conflict resolution and conflict management? Is there a process for students to go and to think about their actions? Not only students, but the adults as well. Freedom to learn. I know when I was working on the theorists, I remember a theorist, and I can't recall the theorist's name off the top of my head, but this theorist talked about, are students free to learn within their school? What does that look like when they have the freedom to learn and to learn at their level and choice? And then trust. Authentic learning is built on personal relationships. Can students trust their teachers? Can teachers trust the administrators? Can parents trust, the teachers? It's about building trust and relationships in order for the community to stand together. And then empowerment. What does that look like? True empowerment is developing the information, skills, and commitment to facilitate others' empowerment. So we want to not only build or empower students, but empower the adults that are working with students in the building as well. And then we are moving on to professional learning communities, and Dr. Lamb has talked about that. So with professional learning communities in Dufour's model, I want to talk about these 6 characteristics briefly and how this ties into PLCs. So PLCs is not just a group of teachers who meet regularly. We're talking about teachers who share beliefs and values and norms. What are those norms that are taking place within these meetings? We're talking about teachers who are being supported by their leadership. They're not only being supported, but they also have a leadership role. They're given the time, they're given the space to work together to plan, and we want to make sure those norms are intact at every meeting. And then collective learning. Again, that goes back to collective teacher efficacy. But teachers are not learning alone. You're having teachers learn from each other, They're walking through classrooms together. They are discussing content together. They are trying together. And then as a group, they're coming up with a plan that works best for their students. They're looking at how to grow students. So that collective learning not only just works within the classroom for students, but teachers as well. The privatization of teaching. Teaching is no longer a private behind your door, close the door. I'm going to go teach. You teach on your side. I teach on my side. Teachers are visiting each other's classrooms, sharing their problems. They're co-planning together and making sure they're changing a shift in their building. Focus on student learning. So there are 4 questions. So how do we know? What do we do when students aren't learning? How do we know if they've learned it? What do we do if they didn't learn it? And then so teachers have to be able to answer these questions along with PLC leads so that they know how to move and how to inform instruction. And then finally, collaboration. Teachers share expertise. They share their expertise through their experiences in the classroom, developing curriculum together, creating instructional materials. And I remember in a PLC, there were 2 math teachers working together, and one teacher asked the other math teacher, hey, how did you solve that problem? They got up and went to the board and showed each other how they solved the problem. They weren't working in isolation. They were working to make sure what they were teaching their students aligned with the standard, and they wanted to ensure that they were doing it best for their students. So these 6 characteristics help build the professional learning communities. So my quick takeaway all three of these chapters were so rich, had much depth in knowledge. But what I want to share with you briefly in each chapter, chapter 21, your change has to be the right change. We have to make sure we are not using, a cookie cutter blueprint to build a house. We have to make sure we are creating a space where everyone can learn. Chapter 22, changes for everyone. We want to apply the change. We want to build capacity. We want to close the equity gap. We want to become culturally responsible to teaching and learning. And then build a community that makes it last. How do we sustain all of this at the end of the day? And so by doing that, we want to make sure we are preparing for not only the sustainability for right now, but what it looks like in the long run, what it looks like in the future, and how the culture and the building can sustain as we try to change the not only the culture but improve test scores, build better students, and make sure we're taking care of each other and our scholars every day in the learning process. And those are the three chapters, 21, 22, 23. I will take any other comments or questions.
All right. I got a couple of things.
Okay.
If you'll stop your share, let's see if we can. I know this won't work, but I'm going to try it anyway. It's a great job, by the way. Let's see.
Thank you. Okay. Did it stop sharing or are we still
Yeah, it stopped.
Okay.
Let me see. That's me and Kenny right there at graduation. We did one on lack of minority, or he did, lack of minority representation in gifted programs. I think it's real important. Again, I think that's the key. If you want to talk about equal access and not over access, I think that's it starts with that one. You referred, Naisha, to social constructivism or constructivist theory. It starts with John Dewey, and then it goes through Vygotsky, Bandura, Brofenbrenner, to some extent, Gusky and again Bandura. All of those are social constructivists. Peter Gray's the one you're talking about that talks about kids needs to be free to learn. You need to know your social constructive people because most of your dissertations are going to start with that as your first of your theorists for your dissertation on how people learn, how kids learn. That's going to be your front half. Most dissertations are going to have a conceptual framework, and I'm asked the question that every day. What's the difference in a conceptual framework and a theoretical? Well, it's the difference between one and two. It's not real hard. One's a theorist, two's a conceptual. I mean, this is not real high level. You don't even have to take your shoes off to count to three. It's either one or two. Now, why would you need two? Well, your first theorist says this is how it's done, or this is what ought to be done. Your second theorist says this is how we ought to do it. So that second theorist is real important when you get to chapter 5 and you start making recommendations on how you should do things. That's where that second theorist gets real helpful. Implications, discussion and implications. Your first theory will cover those. The last theory, your second theorist has got to be the one that says, I'm making this recommendation that we do this based on Linda Darling Hammond's staff development delivery model or Thomas Gusky's for administrators. It's always good to have not only a what to do person, but a how to do it person in your dissertation in leadership. Because we're expected to do things, not just talk about things. We're expected to do things to effect change. Kind of the whole notion of Naisha's presentation tonight. That's why it's last. At the end of the day, at the end of this course in curriculum, you're expected to do something, to effect a change, to make things better. That's what you're trying to do with your dissertation as well. It mirrors this process. You need a theorist that says this is what we ought to do, and one that says this is how we ought to do it. We get a lot of people who says everybody says this is what you ought to do, but then very few of them can make it work. Your job is as a leader is to make it work. Don't ever forget that. We need the social constructivist people, how people learn, how students learn. You need that up front, but you need on the backside of that, you need somebody that says, this is how we go about doing this. That's real important in any program. It's real important in anything that you're trying to change or do that you have a clear roadmap of how to do that. You're not just guessing. Of the best practices that will get us the best results. I think that's the part of that's important to me. I really like that back half theorist. They're the practical people. And the last thing that I will say is, and I've harped on this before, but I'm going to harp on it again. You don't do more with less. You do less with less. Don't be the person that tells their faculty all the time, well, we can do more with less. No, you can't. People won't follow your leadership if you're going to say dumb things like that. What you need to do is say, if we're going to do this, what are we willing to give up? What is this going to replace? Don't keep adding to the plate. Every Easter, and sometimes when I can slip away more often, but every Easter, my wife and I go to the Grove Park in Asheville. We started going, I think, the first year we were married. Um, Grove Park didn't used to be as expensive and exclusive as it is now. We used to go regularly when we lived up there or lived near there early in our lives and married lives and careers. But one of the things that even somebody as big as me, you have to make decisions when you're going through that Saturday night buffet. You can't get everything. You got to make choices. If you're gonna get this, you got to give that up. Even when something that you want everything that they got on Saturday night at the Grove Park. They got everything, but you got to give some things up. That's a hard lesson even for me. But you got to give some things up. So when we talk about we want to implement change, we want to implement something new, and that's what change means. Before we embark on that change, we need to identify what we're going to give up. What are we going to let go of in place of what the change that we want? That's the only way that you're going to get buy-in from your faculty. If it's just another thing that you're adding to their plate, remember, top down doesn't work. The first tenet of leadership is followership. If you're out in front just by yourself, you're just crazy old man like me, just out walking by yourself. You got to have the group with you. And I'm telling you, if you want to affect change in any real way, you've got to decide at the time you're ready to implement the change, you've got to be firm in your conviction of what we're going to give up if we're going to do this. I think that's the secret. I think that's the key. We can't just keep on adding more. We do less with less. We don't do more with less. Not the way it works. Um, just go to the chem lab. When you have all equations have to be balanced. You don't get more out of them than you put in. It's not the way it works. All right. Anybody have anything for the good of the group? I see our time is up. It's 8 o'clock. We've done well. We've stayed on our time tonight. Nice, excellent presentation. I love how you summarized that. I loved your slideshow. Very direct to the point, big ideas. That's what we want to see. Like seeing it that way. All right. Okay, so we're gonna hit it again. Somebody remind me, the first weekend in June, is that our weekend?
Yes, sir. June 6th, the weekend of June 6th and 7th.
June 6th and 7th, and I'll try to remember that week to send you the survey for whatever we're having. I'm thinking biscuits, but we could, if somebody's got a better idea, shoot it to me in an email or a text if you got a better idea than Bojangles biscuits on Saturday morning. That's pretty hard to beat, but I'm open to suggestion. I've had a great time this semester. I told you, and I didn't have to tell you this. Y'all, it didn't take y'all long to figure out. I don't know much about curriculum, but we got through it. We've done well. We've learned curriculum not from the point of view of a curriculum instruction specialist, but from an administrative person in curriculum. It's a different deal. I hope that somewhere along the line that light bulb came on. That curriculum is different for us. It has to be, or we won't move schools. We won't affect change. All right. I will see y'all the first weekend in June. Everybody have a good break. Make sure you finish curriculum, our curriculum audit, our task stream evidence. If you get that in, I'll be happy. Grades are already in, so we're good to go. Give yourself a hand tonight. Y'all did a great job. Thank you, Naisha. It's good to see everybody. I'll see you in June. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, everyone.